Manager McGill, ready to get us started?
Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. Tonight's agenda, we have the consideration of a resolution authorizing the destruction of certain municipal records. We do that annually following the Pennsylvania Municipal Records Retention Act. Consideration of a resolution opting to participate in Allegheny County Community Development Block Grant Program and Home Investment Partnership Program for the years 2027 to 2029. This is CDBG funds that we use for ADA ramps typically. So this is just the next 3-year cycle of the program that's coming up. Consideration to ratify the manager's approval of an emergency repair to the Recreation Center ice rink refrigeration system. Consideration to purchase 46 ballistic helmets for use by the police department. Consideration to purchase one ready-to-use 4-wheel drive snowplow truck from Jim Shorkey Auto Group through the Pennsylvania CoStar's purchasing program. And then consideration to award maintenance contracts for crack sealing brick streets, curbs, and root damaged sidewalks. And we will hear a little bit about those contracts as a discussion session item. That's all I have, or that's all we have, I should say.
Great, thanks. Okay, next up, zoning.
Yes, thank you, commissioners. So I have with me RJ Susko from OHM, who will be our primary consultant on the zoning ordinance update project. So we have reached the end of the first phase of the project. We presented, when I say we, I really mean RJ. RJ presented to the planning board last week at their meeting and now is giving the phase 1 report out to the commission. Overall, our goal is to have this project wrap up probably around the April or May timeframe of next year. So you will be hearing from us many times continually over the next year. So with that, I will hand it off to RJ to run through the presentation.
I just hit the arrow buttons here, right?
Yeah, should be able to.
Cool,
Maybe
okay.
up and down. We'll see.
There, it is up and down. All right, thanks everyone for giving me a bit of your time tonight. I know you have a lot to do at these meetings, so we'll try to be efficient, but also we welcome questions. I have seen a few of your faces on the steering committee before, but for those who are new, I hope that you will come along this journey throughout the project and also tonight to delight in zoning as much as I do. So this is the end of phase 1, as Ian said, of our project. We just have a quick little summary of the phases up here. We are here at the end of number 1, launch. You will see me at the end of each phase back at this meeting as well as at the Planning Commission, although for number 4, that will hopefully be to have all of you voting to adopt a successful ordinance at the end of this process. But as Ian mentioned, we will be going until about April of 2027. The next time you will see me will be a bit far in the future because the diagnose and draft phase is our longest one of the project. That's about 8 months where we just write behind the scenes. But today, we are at the end of phase 1. Actually, really today, this is the last thing that we do as part of phase 1. So you can see some of the tasks that we've had, well, all the tasks really for phase 1 that we've had going on here. We have done coordination of your plans and policies that already exist for you know, whether it really anything in the planning realm, whether it's touching how to update the zoning ordinance, how to take care of Uptown. We also have a public outreach and education plan. I believe both of the memos that are listed on here are in your packets,
Yes,
right? Yep. So you have full copies of all of these, but we're going to run through the outcomes of this phase and let you know what's coming up next. And I'll pause a couple times for questions. So again, just to keep us moving, if we could try to stick to that, but if there's anything you need clarification on quickly, feel free to jump in. So, well, actually, I'll just pause right now. Do you have any questions about the schedule before we roll into the plans and policies? Outcomes. All right, hearing none. Let's go into your plans and policies review. So this is the coordination memo that's in your packets. So we took a look at quite a few things to start off the rewrite process. I've grouped them into 3 categories: your municipal plans, comprehensive plan, master plan for your parks, plans and strategy documents related to Uptown, and then plans and strategy documents related to transit-oriented development, or TOD, which unsurprisingly is quite important in Mount Lebanon. So what we're going to talk about with each of these groupings are, 1, what we learned, how that impacts how we approach the zoning and subdivision and land development ordinance drafting, and what we'll do during that drafting process in response to what we learned. So the big top lines, you've all seen these documents. There are probably no surprises here, but it's just good to reiterate what we know going in. Modernized zoning, that's sort of the chief charge of the resiliency chapter recommendation to update the ordinance. We want to make sure that we're enabling reinvestment, we're promoting resilience throughout the community, and also at the same time protecting the historic character that your residents really value. So change, is not really contemplated on a grand scale. It's more of an incremental evolution. Gentle density is one of those planning jargon terms, that means sort of a soft evolution of reasonable ways that people want to use their property, and reasonable ways to allow the community to grow while also protecting the things that we value in those neighborhood scale developments. So looking at what we'll do to update your code, reviewing the zoning standards for permitted housing types. Accessory dwelling units is certainly an open question. It was something that was talked about a bit in the comp plan, and we'll drill down further into in this process. Also making sure that infill standards allow people to reasonably reinvest in their property without changing the character of the neighborhood, making sure that it's context sensitive. That also looks like incorporating flexibility mechanisms in your code. So if there is a redevelopment or development of the few pieces of remaining vacant land that you have, that municipal leaders are able to look at the site and be context sensitive and have some tools for negotiation, that maybe there's something that makes a little more sense compared to what exactly your code has written in your saldo. Again, subdivision and land development ordinance, please forgive me, I'm going to use an acronym because it's a long one. But looking at flexibility tools to be able to negotiate for community benefit in that development process. And also making sure that we dial in design standards for those redevelopments, for green infrastructure, modern best practices. Obviously, resiliency and green infrastructure is a really important part, of the planning in this community, as shown through the comp plan. So scale, yes,
Scale.
yes,
Make sure we dial in some scale.
yes, yeah. So
Just green.
there is a bit of a mention on the Uptown slide, although I think that really it applies throughout.
It
The
has
whole
to,
project.
yeah, that's one that I really notice.
Yes, yeah. Any particular examples that you're thinking of? That you
Oh,
want?
let's see, there's one on Altadena that is way over scale. There's one on Jefferson that's way over scale. I can.
And these are residential.
Residential.
Okay.
Yeah, they're too high, too built up off the ground, blah, blah, blah. So I think we ought to think about scale.
Yes, yeah, for sure.
Lot coverage, all that kind of good
Definitely.
stuff.
Definitely with infill standards, that's something that we've talked
Yeah.
about pretty early in the process, looking at some examples of things that maybe, reinvestment is important, but they went in a different direction than maybe
Right.
we expected.
Right.
So-
And it's hard because of the stormwater stuff that has to be, incorporated now and oftentimes held underground. And so it's not an easy task, but, have a keen eye on it.
That's why you hired the best. We hope. We're definitely going to make sure that everything is in context, because that's something that definitely has been a theme in talking to the steering committee as well as staff. Is it's all contextual. You have a built-out community which already gives you quite a bit of context, whether it's in the residential neighborhoods or in Uptown. So the top line, this is really what makes Uptown what it is. That historic Main Street form, it's really in the DNA of that district, and certainly not something that people want to see changing. So when we're updating design standards, we want to make sure that it reflects how Uptown already functions. The public realm, the streetscape, the way that people can interact with sort of the built environment of Uptown is what people really love about it. So we want to make sure that that's protected and recognized, not looking to change. So looking at lot coverage, setback requirements, right now the setback is generally 0, but that's not what your ordinance says. So looking at things like that,
I know,
right?
yeah. And it really probably should still be 0.
Yes.
It really should.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It's
You
crazy.
don't want infill that looks different. You want it to match. So making sure that Art Deco and modern building stock are taken into account, looking at your design guidelines so that they're not contradictory with Uptown. And also scale and character of your sign regulations. We already have some good foundational recommendations in the uptown design guidelines. We're gonna take a look at that, best practices for, model sign ordinances, and kind of smash them together and see what we get, to make sure that what you're seeing in the built environment is reflective of the scale and character that you already enjoy. And lastly, transit-oriented development. This one's really, does what it says on the tin. Station areas are intended to function as walkable neighborhoods first, not just car convenience areas.
Right.
Parking garages are useful for commuters as well as people that enjoy your Main Street areas. But, ultimately, transit-oriented development is about allowing people to sort of have that interplay with, there's this amenity of making it easier to get around, the area and not having to use a car. So making sure that street design and site planning standards really prioritize multimodal access as a base value. It's not optional. It's the whole psychology of why you design that street and pedestrian experience. So what we'll do as part of this is review your district standards to make sure that around transit stations, they're aligned with best practices for TOD. And you already have a complete streets policy, so integrating that as much as possible into the SALDO and the public realm design standards. This is probably more of a tune-up, than anything. Mount Lebanon is already obviously built to be pretty, transit-oriented and pedestrian-friendly in that regard because of historically how it built up. But again, it's all about dialing it in so that we are allowing that character to continue and to thrive rather than change majorly over time. So that was the speed run of the many pages that we read about your ongoing planning efforts and what you'd like to see in the future. But do you have any questions before we move on to public outreach about what we just heard?
Do you guys understand what transit-oriented development is? It's like around Washington DC where they built up and oftentimes built right next to the subway station, so you literally wouldn't have to have a car. You could leave your apartment, get on the subway and go into town. It's that concept.
Yep.
Okay.
It's, you can look at it from a couple of different angles, whether it's living in the community and enjoying being able to walk to the T and, go to work downtown and whatnot. But it's also being able to capture, for people that are maybe coming to the parking garage, that economic benefit to the community, that, you have something that's thriving around those transit stations and you can stop and get a bite to eat before you hop in your car and maybe drive home to Scott Township or Bridgeville or wherever else you live in the area. Serving a couple different.
Some of them have that, like a dry cleaner right next to the subway stop, so you pick up your dry cleaning on the way home.
Right.
It's that kind of
Interactive
thought
stuff.
process, yeah.
So obviously, Mount Lebanon is one of the flagship areas for transit-oriented development in this area, and we want to make sure that we're mindful of that. We've done a lot of planning around that. So, if there are no other questions, I will hop into that public outreach plan. So again, you have this in your packets in the full version. By no means do I think you're going to read the pages that are screenshotted on here, but just to kind of help you follow along with what we're talking about as we go through these slides. This plan is a detailed roadmap throughout the project for the public engagement activities that we'll be carrying out across 4 identified stakeholder groups. This is what the plan is basically organized around, is who we're engaging, when and why. So something that was really emphasized in the RFP, that we responded to for this project was making sure that there is an educational component. We're not looking to redo any engagement efforts that have previously occurred during the comprehensive plan, or you have an active transportation plan going. You've surveyed the public generally, for sure. So this effort is more about taking what we've already heard from the public and actualizing that in your zoning code and in your SALDO. So when we engage with the public and with the business and development community, it's going to be from, generally speaking, an educational lens, from sharing information about what can be enabled or how the comprehensive plan can be actualized through some of these changes that we can make to the code. So I'm going to run you through each of these stakeholder groups and then sort of a quick touch on each of the phases, the highlights that you'll see in each of those. So the way that these stakeholder groups are organized is based on who we'll be engaging with, what we'll be doing with them, and what educational aspects go into each of these stakeholder groups. And the first one is us here tonight, elected officials, municipal staff, and advisory boards. So this looks like throughout the process, workshops. We just had a really nice one with the steering committee about what the municipality's regulatory goals are. So setting that understanding of how strict versus how, permissive. Not entirely permissive, it sounds like, we kind of picked this very nice middle of the road option of making sure that vision is the driver, but building in that flexibility to be context sensitive or to do things that make sense for the site and the community rather than very prescriptive, trying to master plan a community that's already built out. You can't pull things out of the ground that are already there, but you can give flexibility to let that community vision guide. And so that's an example of one of the workshops that we recently had with the steering committee, which has Ann on it as well as a couple other
Jeff.
members. Yeah.
And Jeff, you're on it.
I think,
don't
yeah,
think you
Jeff-
were there. You there?
He
Yeah,
was.
you were there.
Jeff was there.
Yeah, we had lunch beforehand. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I was there.
Half asleep, sorry.
Yes, we have the two of you as well as a couple planning commissioners on that and some municipal staff. So at the end, towards the end rather of this process, we'll re-engage from the educational side on making sure that the advisory boards and authorities are trained on things in the new ordinance that interface with their review duties, as well as, just kind of making the adoption of the new code and administration of any changes to permitting go a little bit smoother, so you can all hit the ground running with the new ordinance. On the public side, we talked about this a bit already. We don't want engagement fatigue. We don't want to redo the questions that we've already asked. But we do want to make sure that at community events and places where the project is publicly visible, that we're sharing with people how zoning and subdivision land development ordinance can actually impact their day-to-day lives. And by no means are these decided, but just some examples of things that people are probably interested in. Accessory dwelling units, short-term rentals, urban chickens, that's always a big one. But those are a few things that were discussed in your comprehensive plan and usually what on the residential side people want answers for when you're doing a code modernization. So part of that, but also part of sharing information that's more easily accessible for understanding how to apply for a permit, or what zoning district you live in. Those are some of the different ways that we'll communicate outcomes of the plan. We have some fun stuff planned for sure, as well as a few other optional public participation activities that could be deployed later in the plan.
And we have a website or page on our website that'll be launching very soon. It's in draft form right now. We're waiting on a couple last tweaks to it to launch it so that people will be able to track the progress of the update and get more information about what's happening as well.
Yep. So moving on to the business and development community. This looks like the Mount Lebanon Partnership, local businesses, real estate stakeholders. We've talked about engaging the group at the Beverly Shops. We've talked about the Castle Shannon Boulevard, potential business district that was discussed in the comp plan. Potential real estate professionals that can give context as to redevelopment prospects, maybe some of the larger institutional landowners in the area. These are the types of groups that we'll be talking to. We are in the midst of scheduling roundtable sessions to sort of launch into this diagnose draft phase 2 process so that we can ground the recommendations that come into that first draft in the actual experience of people that have to live and work within these ordinances. Because you can have all the technical knowledge in the world, but if you don't hear from people about how things really are on the ground, you're always going to be missing something. So at the end of this process, user-friendly graphics, tables, a more accessible, plain language ordinance is what we will be able to deliver to this community to enable reinvestment long-term. And lastly, we have planning partners. This looks like the active transportation plan team, South Parking Garage feasibility study, and Allegheny County Economic Development, AKA ACED. We already have talked to the active transportation plan team, and I believe their recommendations are coming out around May. So we expect to come back around, have a touch point where we can, take what we learned about those street typologies particularly and look at integrating them into the new code, into the Saldo. Share progress, make sure that we have awareness of everything else that's going on. So by the time we get to the end of this, we will hopefully be able to successfully incorporate the planning outcomes from the other efforts that you have going on. And for this educational piece, that's actually for us, the team that's working on the zoning ordinance. We will learn from the other teams for these ongoing projects what needs to be integrated into the new code, as I just mentioned, to keep everything consistent moving forward. Before I hit each of the phases, do we have any questions about stakeholder groups?
I have a question.
Yes.
So would the school district and St. Clair Health be considered planning partners?
What we've discussed so far is probably grouping them in with the business and development community. Although they, I'm sure, have some planning efforts going on, that lens is mostly focused on the outcomes that are already being driven by the municipality. So as well as looking at the current plans and policies, we have those in process things being integrated as well.
I just want to make sure that we pick them up somewhere.
Yes, yeah, I think was it at the steering committee maybe that we
Yes,
talked
that
about
we
pulling them
talked
into the focus groups, yeah, so, yeah, those roundtable sessions will be the main contact there.
Be nice if we could pull PennDOT in, but,
We'll see what we can do.
and PRT, although, you know.
Some organizations we are not going to affect change in, so we'll.
Exactly, I know, I know. I agree.
Any other? Good, all right. So again, you have the full plan, if you want to read each of these in detail, but phase one, which we are now exiting, is really about laying municipal groundwork, making sure that we have set the stage for a successful project. And again, we're talking about avoiding engagement fatigue, so we're reviewing those to avoid redundancy, and we will be launching that online zoning hub that Ian mentioned a bit ago, as we wrap up this phase. Number two, this is all about building context on the engagement side. So again, we talked about those roundtable sessions already, but that will be leading us into the diagnostic process that is part of the full code audit. I get to sit down and read every single word of your code for the next couple of weeks. We'll also have milestone review workshops throughout this second phase. We'll be coming back to the steering committee every second module to take strategic guidance and feedback, if what we heard in those workshops is being successfully echoed in the draft. And we'll also be checking in regularly with municipal staff on a more immediate basis as we move through the drafting process. And like I said, you won't see me at this meeting until the end of that phase, which is the lengthiest one. But as we begin to wrap up phase two and come out of the zoning cave, we're going to have some activities that build excitement for phase three, which is the big public education campaign. I admit I may have put this in the proposal just because I really wanted to do a podcast, and you guys have a pretty cool podcast. But there will be a special edition of Inside Lebo that comes out in the fall as we wrap up this phase to promote the community engagement activities of phase three, which is the public education campaign. So this kicks off, aside from the cool podcast, with the first community open house, where we'll take, some of that early information from that first draft, since we will have something to report out to the community at that point, and connect those concepts to the goals that were established in your comprehensive plan. Also during this phase is when we'll be holding that workshop for the advisory boards and committees to make sure that they are prepared for a smooth transition for the new code. And this is also most likely where we'd be deploying most of the optional activities in the public participation menu that was part of the proposal. The roundtable sessions are an example of an early deployment of some of those options from the menu. But this could look like a scavenger hunt with placemaking features, or a zoning night out where people will, for some reason, willingly subject themselves to me talking at them about zoning for maybe something that's a topic particularly on the community's mind at that point. It just depends on what the project needs, but we've also been chatting about some visibility at events over the summer just to keep people engaged and excited. I think excited anyway for what's going to be coming throughout this phase of the project. And then lastly, phase four, it is technically named adoption in the proposal, but that's boring, so I called this celebrate because that's what we're going to do at the end of the project. We're going to be celebrating a successful code update, the way that it can actualize those comprehensive plan goals. I mean, that's a major box to check coming out of a comp plan. And we're going to have, at the beginning of this phase, we start the statutory review period with ACED, but at the same time that we have those statutory engagement pieces going, we're also going to be having that community wrap party, the second open house, where we can share out more concrete information about this is what it's going to look like if you get a permit for your potential urban chickens, or any of the other things that are of particular interest, maybe some of those infill and design standards for what an addition can look like on your house. Things that actually impact people's day-to-day lives and don't just feel like a weird wonky code thing. We're going to celebrate those at the wrap party. And we will conclude the project with your public hearing, adoption, and the final document delivery. So I look forward to celebrating that with you all in 2027, partially because I will be done drafting probably at least 100 or 200 pages of zoning code, but also just because this is going to be pretty great achievement to be able to give your zoning ordinance a facelift and enable some really cool things for your community. So with that, more Q&A if you have any. Happy to answer anything about that plan or any questions about the process coming up.
I think one of the sticking points when we were going through the comprehensive plan for the new commissioners was density. And that's one where the education is key about what density means and where we intend it and where we don't intend it, et cetera, because that's always a political hot point. You're changing the character of my community and, you know, so just have your eyes
Putting
open.
Airbnbs in.
Airbnbs would definitely one we talked about in the steering committee.
Yep.
Yeah, because that is a real concern, you know.
One of the other issues that's been out there in other communities is there's been a lot of conversations, and I will try not to use acronyms, accessory dwelling units.
Yeah, ADUs.
Our current ordinance only permits one principal structure on a R1 or R2 property. So somebody that wants to build a in-law unit
Yeah.
for someone, they currently can't do that under our zoning ordinance. So the question becomes, you know, do we want to consider those as part of this update? If we do, are there different conditions or restrictions that we want to place on those? Most people, when they're presented as, hey, look, you know, I have a parent that needs a level of care, but they really don't want to live with me. I don't want, you know, to live with them. But we have enough property that we could create this unit on our property. Most of the public really does not have any, I'll say, issues with those uses. It's when that person is no longer in the picture, what does that accessory dwelling unit then become? Right? And it's the whole Airbnb conversation in a different context also.
Parking, you know, stuff like that, yeah.
Right. So something that we talked about in the first steering committee workshop is what sort of lives in your sandbox of what you can zone for, right? And so generally speaking, that's the what, where, and the how. But what it doesn't include is the who. So zoning to say, well, you're allowed to have an in-law suite, but you're not allowed to rent out that separate dwelling unit. That's not something that you get to regulate in a zoning ordinance. You can't
Right,
discriminate
how do you?
against
Yeah.
renters. So when looking at regulations that apply to a district, or even if there's a particular property that's really on your mind, you still want to always keep in mind, this has to be true for the whole district. Now, maybe there are context-sensitive issues that come up property to property, but you have to think about that, well, this is probably how people are going to do it, but then what happens tomorrow or the year after that? So striking that balance of enabling reasonable use of property without having, you know, open the Pandora's box of something maybe you didn't intend, that's sort of the secret sauce of a good zoning code.
It's one of those things that really, really affects people in their communities, and yet nobody other than geeky zoning people understand it.
She didn't mean to gesture at you.
Oh, I'm not
RJ.
offended at all. It's 100%
Be
true.
okay with that.
But no, I mean, like, I'll
Yeah.
give you my little elevator speech of like, what does zoning do? It affects where you grew up. It affects where you grow old. It affects what your friends see when they come to your house. It affects what your family sees when you post your cool remodel, you know, on Instagram or whatever. I mean, it touches so many parts of our lives, but it's presented and has to be legally regulated. It's not really like you have a choice in this very wonky, you know, often text-driven way. But by focusing on modernization to get the these, thous, and wherefores out and just use plain language or use more graphics to support what you have to be able to also say in text, that's something that makes it a lot more accessible and people can kind of see and feel what the impact is in the community. And that's definitely a component that we're gonna have in those public education pieces, is making sure that there's some sort of visual engagement of what would this look like if it was
We have
real.
to illustrate it.
Yep.
Because some of us are visual, so.
Would this go for delinquent properties or
That's more maintenance code
That's
issues.
more maintenance, okay.
Yeah, generally speaking, property maintenance, things that are temporary cosmetic conditions, just because of the different enforcement procedures in Pennsylvania. Property maintenance versus zoning enforcement, much less cumbersome and more effective to regulate those things through a property maintenance ordinance.
When I was in Ian's position and people would ask me to give presentations about exciting things like zoning, I would always start those by saying, nobody really knows or cares about zoning until one of two things happens.
Right.
You come in and you want to do something on your property, and we tell you, no, you can't because the zoning ordinance doesn't permit it, whatever it may be. Or your neighbor's doing something on their property and you don't like it and you say, are they allowed to do that? Then you actually care about zoning. But other than that, it's like anything else, unless it's really directly impacting you, most people are blissfully ignorant of.
And, you know, whether we visibly see it in our day-to-day lives or not, it's always happening in the background. And so the biggest, like the banner goal of this project is it puts Mount Lebanon in a place where you can say yes when there's something good coming, instead of having to react and go, oh, no, I don't know. You know, that's what we don't want. We want to empower you to say yes to the good things. That's what I like to think of zoning as, more than a, no, you can't. So we'll get you there at the end. All right.
Thanks.
All right. All good?
Yeah, cool.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you all.
Get the agenda out. Who's next? Gateway Engineers, crack ceiling in brick streets. Wow.
Exciting stuff.
The fun never ends, really. It just never ends.
Almost as good as zoning.
Yeah, right. Well, sewers now, they come way up there.
Yeah.
So most of what you'll see from Josh is really just, you know, we have, as I think we've talked about before, any number of annual contracts that we award for different maintenance items throughout the municipality. But since we have two new elected officials, I thought it's always helpful to give you a little bit of background on the process and exactly what those mean when you see those come up on the agenda.
Take it away.
So, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having me here tonight. The agenda for this presentation, we're going to go through a background of the maintenance contracts. These are annual contracts that we do. That includes a background on crack sealing, brick street repair, curb repair, and the root damage sidewalk slab replacement project. So the maintenance contracts background, these are yearly contracts that are bid for routine maintenance. So that's repair associated, repair on brick streets. You know, if there's soft spots or subgrade issues or issues with the road. Crack sealing, that's your typical asphalt pavement, crack sealing work. Concrete curb maintenance, replacement of damaged curbs, and root damage sidewalk replacement. So that's replacement of sidewalks that are damaged by tree roots.
Okay.
And those are all accessibility issues. You can't do a wheelchair over, big changes in grade because of sidewalk things that have lifted, so. And they're also trip points for old people like me who trip easily, so that's really one of the reasons why.
But we focus on I forget when Rudy did the different
And
plans.
every 10, it's a 10-year thing, 10-year phase.
So it's just one zone at a
Yeah.
time that we're
Right.
doing, okay?
So these contracts, these were advertised on January 22nd and January 29th. The reason for splitting them is it does create a little bit more competition on them. There's a concrete component to obviously the sidewalk part, and then there's a concrete component to the curbs. So if contractors bid the curbs, that may incentivize the losing bidders to provide a better price for the sidewalk that comes out a couple of weeks later. So
got it.
it does drive a little bit of competition. And it actually worked in this year's we saw what happened in this year's contracts with one of the contractors that were awarded.
Good.
Maintenance contracts, the bids received, so on February 11th, we received bids for the Brick Streets Restoration Program, the yearly concrete curb maintenance program, and crack sealing. And then bids were received the following week for the sidewalk replacement. The crack sealing project is a multi-year contract that we do. And we do something similar on the utility side of things as well, and that ultimately, those multi-year contracts allow you to reduce bidding and administrative costs. So you don't have to put those contract packages together each year. You can do them essentially every 3 or 4 years or whatever the renewal term is.
So if you do the 3 years, the next year, do you have to put that out to bid again, or do you?
It's-
No, okay.
It's at the discretion of the municipality.
Yeah, it's bid as a 3 or 4 year contract, but annually, the municipality has the discretion whether to award the second year, the third year, or the final year. And there's a number of variables that go into that. When I say we, Gateway does a very good job of looking really at material cost to look for
Good idea.
big fluctuations there where we could potentially benefit from going back out to bid. So it really puts the municipality in the best possible position from I'll say a bidding and contract award standpoint.
And say we do the second year, does that go through another?
You'll see it on the agenda item, as an agenda item for
gotcha.
approval. It gets
Okay.
approved every year
Okay.
by the commission.
Yeah, we actually had a few renewal contracts about a month ago, or early January.
Yeah.
That was an example of that.
And by law, can you refresh everyone on when it has to go out to bid? It's basically size related, isn't it? Amount?
It is, and we have a bid limit here, and I won't get the number right, and Andrew's not in the room for this year.
Yeah.
40-some thousand, I think, is.
$1,000? No, anything over that? And professional services don't have to be bid
Professional
out.
services do not have to be bid. We have the discretion not to put those, an RFP out for those. We typically,
It's $46,320.
thank you.
Wow, voices.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But yeah, for professional services, there are instances when if we've got a history of working with somebody offering a professional service and it's been a good experience and we're confident that it is reflective of what I will call market price, we don't always put those out.
Yeah, no problem. It ensures contract consistency over multiple years and incentivizes contractors to provide better pricing. If they know they have a shot at getting multiple years, it'll benefit on the pricing that we receive. So Brick Streets Restoration Program, there's a few pictures on here of it. It essentially consists of the removal and replacement of deteriorated portions of brick streets throughout the municipality. That one, the low bidder on this one is Salenti.
No.
They've done this in the past, I believe. Yeah, they're good.
Good, yay.
Came in under budget amount is $103,000. The low bid amount was $89,955. So good results on that one.
We have the flexibility in that contract, Josh, to, I'll say, award additional work if we have it up to the.
Up to the 130?
Yeah, your budget.
Very cool. It's
And again,
nice. Yeah.
It's been a focus for the commission to make that reinvestment back into Brick Street repairs to extend the life of those streets, because really to replace a brick street is about 3 times the cost of an asphalt street. So the more we can make these types of, I'll say, targeted investments into the brick streets, the further we're able to stretch the lifespan of those streets.
Because they are historic assets.
They are.
And once they're wiped out, they'll never come back. Right. Sorry, little political moment there.
The next contract is the yearly concrete curb maintenance program. This
Name of
is,
that company, No Sweat Service.
Yeah.
Really?
that's what, yeah. Yeah, so this contract that involves the removal and replacement of damaged curb that needs to be replaced. So this contract typically, we try to stay ahead of the mill and overlay program with this. So if there's curbs along one of those streets, we're planning the mill and overlay, we'll target this contract to that. That allows the mill and overlay contracts to focus on milling and overlaying the road. No Sweat is the low bidder. They bid on the other project here, we'll see that later, but the bid amount for this is $153,587.50. The budgeted amount for this project is $199,000, so good results on the bid there. The street crack sealing program, this is sealing of cracks in the asphalt street. You can see it in almost any road you drive on. It's a cost-effective way to extend the life of the asphalt pavement, and we've been doing it in the municipality for over 20 years at this point. Russell Standard Corporation is the low bidder. Their bid amount is $13,000. The budgeted amount was $18,000. And then this project does have options for renewal.
Which apparently they bid at a 0% increase.
It's flat. Yep.
Which is always beneficial.
For us.
Yep. Flat through 2029. And then the root damage sidewalk, this is removal and replacement of concrete sidewalks around trees caused by root damage. G. Pasquale and Sons, there's a low bid on this one. They've done this in the past, at least the past 5 years. They're a good contractor for this work. Their bid amount was $167,875. The budget amount was $197,260. So again, good results on the bids. And that's the end of the presentation. Are there any questions?
We will see all of those items on the agenda tonight for
Fabulous. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ahead of schedule? Greg, come on down.
You're about on schedule. Actually, that clock's a little slow usually.
Oh, all right. There we are, municipal fleet.
Right. So I appreciate you all having me here. Again, no need to hold questions to the end. Interject whenever, feel free. So gonna just do a quick little update. Obviously, 2 new commissioners. So we've been kind of, I would say, the third presentation we've had on fleet, just general things. We first worked with Duquesne Light years ago about a whole fleet assessment, and they took our fleet, had a whole list of recommendations. We kind of listed out every single aspect of each vehicle, you know, current miles, how many miles driven, is it a 24-hour response, what equipment does it have on it, so on and so forth, pretty much everything that you can cover. So we had a long list from Duquesne Light and kind of gave our recommendations, tried to whittle that down, work with the departments, just kind of see like what were their operational needs, presented another, I would say an update. That's a while ago now, so here we are. So basically kind of looking at the 2-end aspect, and that's kind of listed in the memo. The first approach is kind of like the vehicle by vehicle or so on and so forth. efficiency plan. So we're gonna look at exactly like what the efficiency of the fleet can be and how can we make it more, how can we optimize it more and make it more efficient? And then the second approach is more of that fleet policy where it's driven by data and it's driven by long-term goals, because one of the recommendations of the comprehensive plan is to adopt a local climate action plan by 2030. So the data we will be gathering for these years will be put forth towards the climate action plan, and then obviously the consultants within we have with that will obviously be analyzing fleet data and things like that. So kind of getting at those 2 points, but goals obviously are decreased fuel consumption obviously equals decreased emissions. That's an overall goal that's been in the climate action or the climate resolution that was passed in 2022. And then pretty much by tracking definitive metrics such as fuel consumption, the data that I'll be showing you all is pretty much the fuel consumption by each department and by the year for the last 3 years. Still working on actually getting down by each vehicle, so almost like a miles per gallon for each vehicle almost. And then those will kind of tie into the future goals specifically outlined in, like I mentioned, that municipal climate action plan in the future. And then by following those procedures and policies now, that what we decide on will give us more of a defined path in that climate action plan. So it's not leaving it up till 2030 to find out what we want to do. It's finding out what we can do now and how can we make that more efficient, and then hopefully being as efficient as we can be leading into that climate action plan, where we only may need to see minor tweaks or something like that. So like I mentioned, just jumping into some of the fuel data, the last 3 years, so we're looking at 23, 24, and 25. Just overall consumption was just shy of 200,000 gallons. That also includes gas and diesel. So saw a decrease in cost per unit, basically like dollars per gallon. So we saw a 30% decrease in dollars per gallon there. We saw a slight increase, about 8%. You'll see when we get into it by year, it's almost the same between 24 and 25. I think there's a 2% or 0.2% difference there, an increase. And then overall fuel cost has come down. Like I mentioned, that dollar per unit has decreased. So the overall fuel cost has decreased as well. So looking at about $42,000 in overall decreased numbers there.
So it's come down because the price of gas and diesel have come down essentially?
So discussing with Rudy before, we've had buy in bulk purchasing and things like that where we've gotten better deals. So I'm not entirely sure. I think it's per year almost. We buy fuel per year. It's not like we lock in a number.
It's based on a rack price, but we get that through SHACOG. So SHACOG actually bids that annually as a commodity. So we use that as our number. And it's a rack price is fuel fluctuates from minute to minute.
Sure.
You can call and you're going to get a different price every time you call. It's based on a margin. So whatever that profit margin is, that's what we're paying.
Okay, so basically though, what I'm getting at is this is indicating that the efficiency is due to the gas price, not because the cars and or fleet is more efficient.
I don't
at
think
using
that's
gas.
no, I think it's a combination of both.
Combination.
It's a combination of both. So
Yeah, that wasn't very clear, that's
Yeah.
all, thanks.
So over the last, I would say, let me just jump back. Over the last 3 years, we've seen an increase in consumption. So we're consuming more fuel, but we're spending less just because of the competitive, I would say the rack pricing, correct? Make sure my terminology is correct.
There's a lot of variables that play into that. I mean, if we have a
I'm
really
sure.
bad winter, we use a lot of fuel.
yeah.
So-
Yeah.
Kind of getting
Trucks
into
aren't efficient.
23 and 24, 25. You can see obviously Public Works and Police Department are our two main consumers. Obviously with police response, police patrol, Public Works, the street plowing, the leaf pickup, everything that it is pretty much all in I would say lumped in together with that. So 23, we saw an average about $2.67 gallons per, I would say, cost per gallon. Just over 60,000 gallons consumed and just about, I would say, $176,000 spent on fuel. Now we jump into 24, we can look at kind of the increase. Now, obviously, all of the consumption went up, but it went up by 8.12%. Just again, looking at those numbers, we had police and public works increased just a little bit, say the maximum amount as well, because I would say on the fire department end, that's another one that's it's kind of like that variable. The fire department isn't out patrolling, they're more of a response, obviously. They may be driving to do inspections and things like that, but it's not really definitive. As we know, police is out 24/7 patrolling the community, responding to calls and to calls of service and things like that. So
We don't send a fire truck for inspections, do we?
Depends on the inspection.
Wow.
mainly it's a non-apparatus. I wouldn't say it's not a fire truck, so to speak, but sometimes, as the chief mentioned, it depends.
So the apartment building inspections are done by the on-duty crew, so they have to respond to calls potentially while they're out.
Okay, that makes
So
sense.
For
You gotta send a
for
truck.
residential apartment building inspection, a fire truck would go. For every other inspection, it would be an SUV or a
Yeah.
staff
Okay,
vehicle.
thanks. That makes sense.
Why is the fluctuation of the unit price for each department different when we buy like that bulk?
I think just with the data that I had, it was almost kind of the price when those were fueled. So,
Oh, gotcha.
for example, looking at the recreation department, speaking with the recreation department, that their vehicle gets driven, it's not really scheduled. It's kind of as needed when events come up and they have to move it. So they, or the least, I would say $2.06, because they might have been fueling up when fuel was cheaper, and it might have just been their peak time when they were fueling up, compared to also with looking at Public Works, there's the diesel aspect in there as well. So diesel is a little bit more
okay,
cheap,
gotcha.
or diesel a little bit more expensive. So that's why those numbers are a little higher on the Public Works side. But this is more of that
Gotcha.
rough estimate on the
Well,
numbers.
those trucks are not as efficient as a passenger car either.
True, and they are obviously ran, as we saw within the last couple of weeks,
All
well,
the
the
time,
snow,
sure.
they're ran 24/7 at sometimes. So jumping into 2025, we see a decrease in consumption, in a lot of departments. So police, public works, still an increase, because again, that's a kind of a, we don't know how many times they're gonna be ran. It could be many snow events that increases that consumption, or many more calls to service for police. But we saw a 0.23 increase in consumption overall, fleet-wise. And like I mentioned, again, a decrease in cost. So again, just looking at kind of what we are or I would say looking at the overall consumption, yes, it has increased over the years. It hasn't increased drastically, but I would also say to the other end, the cost has, I would say almost not, I don't say drastically, but it has come down by a decent amount. $42,000 over the last 3 years it has decreased. I mean, that's a pretty significant, I would say, advantage for us, I would say, in the cost saving aspect. But again, looking at fuel efficiency or fleet efficiency, we're looking at the decreased consumption in fuel. That's kind of that main goal. That's the driving factor of the plan. So getting into the fleet policy, I would say the purpose kind of the plan, it really aims to not only enhance the fuel efficiency, but also optimize the vehicle. So when we look at exactly what vehicle is used for what purpose, kind of jumping ahead, we'll look at kind of the the fleet rotation schedule or fleet rotation guideline, because it's not technically a schedule sometimes, as you may see. And that kind of jumps into where the municipality really strives to optimize fleet operations, whether that's, again, going back to snow response or police response or fire response, really optimizing those vehicles, and then using this as kind of a tool to guide the decision-making process, because each department head, I know when the recreation department purchased their new van, one of the assistant directors wrote I would say he wrote a great explanation of what that van's used for and why it wasn't optimized or why it wasn't efficient to have a hybrid options, because they were losing cargo space. And the primary function of that van was to move cargo, was to move tables, was to move event stuff. So that was kind of what that was. And Chief Haberman, I think it was the beginning of last year, gave a presentation on what vehicles were being purchased that year, Watch Commander, K9, patrol vehicles, and he listed out what are the service needs of that vehicle. And that's basically ties into what this is that when department heads purchase, or I say request vehicles to be purchased, kind of using this framework to use the guidelines of what we're looking for and how that vehicle can be optimized over its lifespan, whether that's 5 years to be rotated or end of life. So kind of at the core, again, the plan establishes a systemic approach to fleet management, including regular assessments such as fuel data. So we can look at fuel consumption per gallons, I would say per miles per gallon and things like that. And then, again, ties back into the overall goal of how can we optimize the fleet? How can we make the fleet more efficient with fuel consumption? Because again, going back to the resolution, we want to make sure that our carbon emissions are coming down over time. So procedures for kind of the fleet policy is the number one, we've talked about this many, many times. For the two new commissioners, we've talked about service delivery to the municipality is paramount. It's the number one priority. So we obviously, with those vehicles, we would list the vehicle's needs, whether they're 24-hour response, whether they're plow capable, whether they need to have onboard equipment and things like that. We need to ensure those services are clearly met to basically determine the appropriate vehicle type and the specification. The next one, obviously, is to identify available options. With currently the technology that we have, there's no electric or hybrid option that can support plows. So the vehicles that we need for plow capable, or that have to be capable to plow, there's no efficient that's diesel. And it's just the diesel or heavy duty gasoline, but there's no alternative option. As of right now, may change over the next 25 years. But identifying the potential for standardizing vehicle types to kind of streamline the functionality of those, whether it's hybrid, whether it's electric and things like that. Because also mentioning in the memo as well that hybrid vehicles just generally produce, I would say, or consume 20% less fuel over its lifespan. So that's something that we can look at. And if it meets, again, that service need, something to kind of check down over this, I would say, course of thing, or the course of, I don't know how you want to put it, the checklist, pyramid almost. Then obviously the cost comparison, because the cost is obviously something we look forward to as well. If something is going to be double, triple the price, for example, electric fire trucks right now are pretty much double the cost of what a normal diesel fire truck is. An electric fire truck is almost double the cost. So obviously not super cost effective there. And then moving on, we would assess the alternative limitations. So if an alternative fuel option is available, we would identify any limitations that are associated with that vehicle. So if it's an electric vehicle, does it need a charging station? If it's a hybrid vehicle, does it have any type of, limitations on upfitting and things like that, whether it needs to run onboard equipment, does it have a limitation? And then obviously, finally, we kind of get back into that rotation schedule or rotation guideline is for each new vehicle, how is it going to be rotated? If it's a police patrol vehicle, where is it going to go? How many years? And we have those with the department heads. They've established where those vehicles do go. But sometimes, as Alan mentioned in the rotation guideline, so to speak, is there's new vehicles that get purchased that will then move towards, in previous practice, has not been rotated. I would say traditionally it's to something new. So it's kind of like a new thought, I would say.
Okay, you totally lost me there.
Sorry.
Say that again.
Yeah, so with some of the rotation, that's why I don't want to say
Yeah.
rotation schedule. It's like a guideline. So for example, as we see on the far right, it's a recreation van. The van was just purchased. Discussing with Andrew McCreary in finance, that vehicle will eventually go to the custodian supervisor.
Okay.
That's the custodian that goes to all the facilities we
Right.
have here. And primarily it would be used to move supplies and things like that,
Right.
custodial supplies.
So is that what happens to the old van? Goes to him?
Currently, right
No.
now,
The old van is sold.
yeah, the old van is sold, yeah. The old van is no longer,
Oh
yeah.
my God.
So the old
My
van,
grandfather van.
it is a 2011, it was a 2011 that was sold. So kind of getting back to the point of it's not a true schedule, it's more of a guideline because
Right, sure.
as you can see in
There's
some of these,
discretion in it.
there's discretion, there's
There you
as
go.
needed, thank you.
You're
Looking
welcome.
for that word. But, so for example, the custodian supervisor drives a Ford Explorer that was passed down from the parking. So after that vehicle goes, and depending on when this next rotation happens, it's more of a discretionary thing. So
Sure.
kind of outlined, I would say in the dotted line up at top, those are vehicles that are purchased new. Those are new vehicles that are rotated through the departments.
Right.
And then as you can see at the bottom, it's a single-use vehicle. So K-9, dump trucks, parking enforcement, that was actually the EV parking vehicle, and then fire apparatus. We're not gonna rotate a fire engine into the inspections department, because obviously that's not feasible there. So,
We sell them though.
yes, we do.
Yeah.
But-
Why not? Right, there you go. They're so efficient.
But, and then speaking with, kind of on the topic of fire, speaking with the fire department, or with the fire chief, that traditionally they actually had a fire chief's vehicle that would go into the fleet of squad vehicles. So those are for any type of on-duty shifts or kind of manpower movers. Now, with the new purchase of the chief's vehicle, the old chief's vehicle went to the assistant chief, and then the assistant chief's vehicle will then be rotated into the fire department squad. So it used to be 6 years in between rotations, but now with the new purchase, it's going to be 4 and then 4. So again, there is some discretion there, but this kind of gives a rough idea of where vehicles are being moved.
Now, that's not including, like, we went from gas lawnmowers in the golf course to electric. Does
No.
that?
Yeah, these are vehicles.
Yeah, these are vehicles, so potentially looking at
The
equipment.
savings,
Stuff you
I
can
mean,
drive on the road.
So it would apply to, for your example, a golf course, or a lawnmower at the golf course, potentially in the next round of leasing, potentially moving to electric golf courts.
okay.
So there are other considerations that are sort of outside of what is,
But that would go towards our climate goal or whatever we want to.
correct. And one of the things that, I'm sorry, Greg, I'm just gonna, because we've been talking about this for several years, is moving away from sort of the vehicle by vehicle approach to working more towards trend lines, right? So as you're considering a vehicle, any vehicle that we may need, the first question is always in terms of service impacts. Can we get a vehicle that is either a hybrid or an EV that will not negatively impact the services that that vehicle needs to deliver, right? So if the answer is yes, then the next thing that we would take a look at would be overall cost, right? What's the delta between they call them ICE, internal combustion engine, versus a hybrid or an EV? What are any associated infrastructure costs, right? If it's gonna be an EV, do we have adequate charging stations in place? The next question after that would be an upfit cost. We saw that as we went through for some of the police vehicles.
Yep.
For the Teslas, while they make a comparable vehicle, when you throw the upfit cost onto them, they end up to be about $30,000 to $35,000 more expensive because of the process that you have to do that. And then we also need to look at what I'll call just staff training cost, right? Do we have a mechanic who is certified to work on whatever type of vehicle it is that we're considering purchasing? If not, what is the cost to actually get that person certified? Or quite honestly, can we get that person certified so that we're not going to void a warranty if it's something that we need to do as an emergency and can't send it back to the dealer? Once we've done all of that, then we start to look at I'll say the trend lines related to fuel consumption, maintenance costs, emissions, all of those things, again, working towards a target of, sort of reducing in those areas where it's possible, again, without impacting service delivery. When Greg referenced the recreation vehicle that Zach Walling did an excellent job of researching, one of the issues there was because of the hybrid and the battery component, it does not have the ability to fold that third row seat down.
Oh, that
right?
would make a big
You have
difference,
to take them
yeah.
out
Right.
in order to get that same, which again, adds a step in, potentially adds some concerns related to, is somebody gonna get hurt taking that seat in and out of the vehicle? Those types of things that are all considerations. And again, that takes time to do that as well. So, again, we don't wanna negatively impact the service that vehicle is able to provide to the residents.
Do we look at, one of the examples was the trucks for the snowplows, right? And there was a diesel versus gasoline. What do we look at? Is one better than the other and less likely to break down or require?
Let the public works director answer that question.
I was gonna say,
Diesel's more, and it has lower torque too, or a higher torque value as well. So when you're pushing snow or hauling salt and so forth, the way it's geared and the way the engine is designed, it has a higher torque value, which means it's more powerful than a gasoline engine.
Okay. And less likely to break down than, because you're,
Yeah,
okay.
they're designed to last longer under that kind of a use.
And they're abused. I mean, not that anybody abuses
It's
them,
a
but
hard-
just
it's a
the,
hard
it's the
nature.
nature of the operation.
And the plows we have on the gasoline vehicles, I would say the gasoline trucks are parking lots and
Yeah.
parking garages. They aren't,
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong, they're not used for
No,
road
back
clearing.
roads.
The road clearing is for our heavy-duty dump trucks or triaxles and things like that.
And boy, they've done a great job this winter. They
Yeah.
really have done a fabulous job. Should be commended. Not a job I want.
So kind of just looking at the overall aspect of it is kind of balancing the fleet policy and the efficiency plan. So the efficiency plan is more of that assessing the service needs, cost and things like that, upfit and limitations, whereas the fleet policy is, like Keith mentioned, looking at overall trend lines of how can we decrease our fuel consumption over the course of 5, 10, 15 years. And I, just from looking at the data that we have accessible, it's that cost per mile. It's how much fuel are we consuming per mile? Because if a vehicle we're purchasing has a 24 miles a gallon highway and an 18 miles per gallon city, obviously we're going to have numbers that vary from that because they're driving within the municipality. And again, like Ian mentions, we're not flat Lebanon, we're Mount Lebanon, so it's a different fuel consumption. So I think those are the numbers that we have and the numbers that we could have control over. But again, kind of going back to that overall consumption is we can't predict what the consumption is going to be over the course of a winter. If
Right.
Public Works is saying, oh, we're looking to have a slow month this month, and we get 17 different snowstorms and snow events, that's gonna change. Commissioner Flynn, feel free to jump in.
Oh, he's got his hand raised.
Thanks. Yeah, no, this is great, and I really appreciate the work that you put into this. The one thing I'm looking at here because this is an interesting diagram to me, and I appreciate it.
Yeah.
But what do I mean this in the most genuine way, why do I care what department it is when it's more the functionality of the vehicle that I'm interested in? What is this telling me that's more valuable than the utility of the vehicle, right? Again, the fire chief's pickup truck, right, has a certain purpose, right? We need a pickup truck. That is different than, maybe that's exactly the same exact model as the parking pickup truck. Yeah, but the municipal manager, the police chief, right, and all the police squads are Ford Explorers. So that, again, it goes back to, for me, it's like I'm most interested in the functionality of the unit as opposed to which department is going to have, because then I maybe have a better way of understanding that optimization of this rotational cycle. But maybe I'm wrong, and I'm just curious what you think.
No, I completely understand what you're saying. I think just our attempt at this was to give the commission an idea of what vehicles are in each department and where they go. Now, I definitely think this graphic here could be amended to show what is the utility of those vehicles. Obviously we could put that the municipal manager, police chief, traffic vehicle, and the watch commanders are all SUVs. Now, each of them have that different capability. The watch commander vehicle is obviously, it's historically a larger SUV. It's not a typical Ford Explorer. It's an Expedition in some cases where it carries more equipment and has more demand. So whereas the public works director, the public works superintendent have historically been Ford Explorers. Whereas the facilities manager's vehicle right now is a Ford F-150 pickup truck. So it does not require to be a plow-capable pickup truck, but it is a pickup truck. And it's just, again, kind of.
You could change your color coding.
I'm gonna chime in here for just a second, because I will give Rudy and the police chief and fire chief and former fire chief Sahida a lot of credit here. So when we look at any vehicle, we're looking at functionality. We're not looking at what department it's in. So we'll talk about parking for a hot minute. So recreation always had a need for a truck. And we figured out a way in which parking could be suited for the functionality of a truck and recreation can be suited so that they're never with an old truck. They have a functional truck every 3 years being rotated in at a 6-year mark. So if you look at that, I don't know what color it is up there, but I know I hand wrote on it when I edited this, is that parking has a new truck every 3 years. The 3-year-old truck goes to second in line in parking, and the 6-year-old truck goes to the recreation department. So I don't care what department it is, the function is still being used for at least 9 years. At the 9-year mark, we'll evaluate whether we want to keep that truck or not, right? It may be valuable for the mechanics to use, or it's some sort of utility for a year or two, and then we'll sell it. But we look at that as we go, so the fire chief's vehicle is now a truck, because guess what? We just are going to buy this year another truck, because that's really where the fire service is going, and the functionality of where it then goes throughout the fleet. So to your point, Commissioner Flynn, we are doing that. We are looking at the functionality of the vehicles. We're not necessarily just looking at what department it is.
I thought that might be the case, Andrew, and I appreciate that. Because ultimately, and there's something that Keith alluded to, right? For me, this is ultimately looking at a broad trend. I don't want to dictate, from a commission perspective, what vehicles should be used. But what I would like to understand is how are we ensuring that we are continuing to optimize, right? And Andrew, you and I could sit around and talk about, when it's the best time to sell a vehicle, right? At a fleet level, right? This is an interesting conversation. Do I keep a vehicle for 5 years or 10 years? Right? That there are reasons to only keep it 5 years, right? They're easier to maintain. They're less expensive from a maintenance perspective, but there are drawbacks because you're spending more money up front. But again, for me, this is that kind of strategic level discussion of how do we continue to optimize the fleet while ensuring that we are meeting the operational needs, which for me goes back to I don't care which department it is. I care it's a pickup truck, it's a dump truck, it's a fire apparatus, et cetera, et cetera. Right? There are functional things that we want to be optimizing through their life cycle, however long we determine is appropriate. So this is great. I like the direction you're going.
And hybrids cost so much more. They do save gas, but boy, because I have one, it costs a lot up front. And now electricity's going through the roof.
And what we're finding as well is a lot of the CoStar's dealers, they don't acquire hybrid vehicles on a regular basis. They can in some cases, but on what we need most of our vehicles for, it's traditional gas vehicles. That may change. Again, it's all just kind of keeping up with this, because the idea of this entire policy and plan is to just be kind of fluid, is to adapt to the technological changes, is to adapt to a different fleet, because, this rotation may change over the next couple of years. It may, historically, the municipal manager's vehicle goes to the deputy chief of police operations. That could potentially change. It's historically been like that, but it's just like Andrew has mentioned.
I didn't see any commission cars in here.
I could put a special category.
I will give you a ride any time you need one.
Commissioner, they're electric bicycles.
Ah, I see. Okay, any more questions? Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
All right, that gives us about, how slow is that? Let me see. We have
6 minutes to go through.
6 minutes?
Boards and authorities.
Yeah, boards and
updates.
authorities. Nick, you want to tell us what's going on in Parks and Rec briefly?
Sure.
High points only, please.
Yes, David did a great presentation on the Racket Center court use, which was very informative, and he's going to be monitoring that ongoing to see, which courts they're using more frequently. And then outreach, they hired Barb Sanders as the new executive director.
Any background on her? Do you know anything about her?
She was on the board.
Oh.
Don't know.
It's all right.
Okay.
I just was curious. How are you? You wanna do it next? Or
Yes,
do you,
exactly.
oh, you have CEB, that's right.
Yes,
I was just
exactly. Yes,
trying
the
to get my
Community
head around it.
Engagement Board had
Yeah.
a very successful Martin Luther King Day of service. And they are in the midst of the Citizens Academy, which is going very well. And they are going to be considering, he'll be chosen to be our next Citizen of the Year.
Yeah,
So, yes,
Marby.
yes.
Jeffrey? I think he stepped out for a beer. Andrew?
I don't have any updates. I've missed most of my things because of travel complications.
Oh, all right. Okay, well, on mine, Finance Committee is, rocking along, talking about trash collection and garbage trucks, and it's fascinating, totally fascinating. I love every minute of it. I know. They're pretty good, though. I mean, they're pretty
They're a fun
engaged
group.
and, it's a big subject. Sorry, bad pun. Okay. Library Board is moving along beautifully. I mean, that library runs very well, as everybody knows. We're waiting to see if the grant comes in for doing the updates to the library. That would be really stunning if it did. And MRTSA continues to move along. I'm on the subcommittee where we took the study that Mount Lebanon did, narrowed it down to priority areas, which will be presented to the board tomorrow night. So I don't have anything other than helped narrow it down to some steps that we could do easily or right away. And then we'll move on from there. So updates to come. All right, that's it. So I'll see everybody in commission. Room.
3 minutes.
3 minutes.